Anne Frank, page 78, Wednesday, January 13th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, this morning I was constantly interrupted, and as a result I haven't been able to finish a single thing I've begun. We have a new pastime, namely filling packages with powdered gravy. The gravy is one of Keyes and Company's products. Mr. Googler hasn't been able to find anyone else to fill the packages, and besides, it's cheaper if we do the job. It's the kind of work they do in prisons. It's incredibly boring and makes us dizzy and giggly. Terrible things are happening outside. At any time of day and night and day, poor, helpless people are being dragged out of their homes. They're allowed to take only a knapsack and a little cash with them, and even then they're robbed of these possessions on the way. Families are torn apart. Men, women, and children are separated. Children come home from school to find that their parents have disappeared. Women return from shopping to find their houses sealed, their families gone. The Christians in Holland are also living in fear because their sons are being sent to Germany. Everyone is scared. Every night, hundreds of planes pass over Holland on their way to German cities. So they're bombs on German soil. Every hour, hundreds or maybe thousands of people are being killed in Russia and Africa. No one can keep out of the conflict. The entire world is at war, and even though the Allies are doing better, the end is nowhere in sight. As for us, we're quite fortunate, luckier than millions of people. It's quiet and safe here, and we're using our money to buy food. We're so selfish that we talk about after the war and look forward to new clothes and shoes, when actually we should be saving every penny to help others when the war is over, to salvage whatever we can. The children in the neighborhood run around in thin shirts and wooden shoes. They have no coats, no socks, no caps, and no one to help them, gnawing on a carrot to still their hunger pangs. They walk from their cold houses through cold streets to an even colder classroom. Things have gotten so bad in Holland that hordes of children stop passerbys in the streets to beg for a piece of bread. I could spend hours telling you about the suffering the war has brought, but I only make myself more miserable. All we can do is wait, as calmly as possible, for it to end. Jews and Christians alike are waiting. The whole world is waiting, and many are waiting for death. Yours, Anne. Saturday, January 30th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, I'm seething with rage, yet I can't show it. I'd like to scream, stamp my foot, give Mother a good shaking cry, and I don't know what else because of the nasty words, mocking looks, and accusations that she hurls at me day after day, piercing me like arrows from the tight-strung bow, which are nearly impossible to pull from my body. I'd like to scream at Mother, Margot, and the Van Dans, Dussel and Father, too. Leave me alone. Let me have at least one night when I don't cry myself to sleep with my eyes burning in my head, pounding. Let me get away from everything, away from the world. But I can't do that. I can't let them see my doubts or the wounds they've inflicted on me. I couldn't bear their sympathy or their good-humored derision. It would only make me want to scream even more. Everyone thinks I'm showing off when I talk, ridiculous when I'm silent, insolent when I answer, cunning when I have a good idea, lazy when I'm tired, selfish when I eat one bite more than I should, stupid, cowardly, calculating, etc., etc. All day long I hear nothing but what an exasperating child I am, and although I laugh it off and pretend not to mind, I do mind. I wish I could ask God to give me another personality, one that doesn't antagonize everyone, but that's impossible. I'm stuck with the character I was born with, and yet I'm sure I'm not a bad person. I do my best to please everyone, more than they'd ever suspect in a million years. When I'm upstairs, I try to laugh it off because I don't want them to see my troubles. More than once, after a series of absurd reproaches, I've snapped at Mother. I don't care what you say. Why don't you just wash your hands of me? I'm a hopeless case. Of course, she'd tell me not to talk back and virtually ignore me for 2 days. Then suddenly all would be forgotten, and she'd treat me like everyone else. It was impossible for me to be all smiles one day and venomous the next. I'd rather choose the golden mean, which isn't so golden, and keep my thoughts to myself. Perhaps sometime I'll treat the others with the same contempt as they treat me. Oh, if only I could. Yours, Anne. Friday, February 5th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, though it's been ages since I've written to you about the squabbles, there's still no change. In the beginning, Mr. Dussel took our soon-forgotten clashes very seriously, but now he's grown used to them and no longer tries to mediate. Margot and Peter aren't exactly what you'd call young. They're both so quiet and boring. Next to them, I stick out like a sore thumb. And I'm always being told, Margot and Peter don't act that way. Why don't you follow your sister's example? I hate that. I confess that I have absolutely no desire to be like Margot. She's too weak-willed and passive to suit me. She lets herself be swayed by others and always backs down under pressure. I want to have more spunk, but I keep ideas like these to myself. They'd only laugh at me if I offered this in my defense. During meals, the air is filled with tension. Fortunately, the outbursts are sometimes held in check by the soup eaters, the people from the office who come up to have a cup of soup for lunch. This afternoon, Mr. Van Dam again brought up the fact that Margot eats so little. I suppose you do it to keep your figure, he added in a mocking tone. Mother, who always comes to Margot's defense, said in a loud voice, I can't stand that stupid chatter of yours a minute longer. Miss Van D turned red as a beet. Mr. Van D stared straight ahead and said nothing. Still, we often have a good laugh. Not long ago, Miss Van D was entertaining us with some bit of nonsense or another. She was talking about the past, about how well she got along with her father, and what a flirt she was. And you know, she continued, my father told me that if a gentleman ever got fresh, I was to say, remember, sir, that I'm a lady, and he'd know what I meant. We split our sides laughing as if she'd told us a good joke. Even Peter, though he's usually quiet, occasionally gives rise to hilarity. He has the misfortune of adoring foreign words without knowing what they mean. One afternoon, we couldn't use the toilet because there were visitors in the office. Unable to wait, he went to the bathroom but didn't flush the toilet. To warn us of the unpleasant odor, he tacked a sign on the bathroom door, RSVP, gas. Of course he meant danger, gas, but he thought RSVP looked more elegant. He didn't have the faintest idea what it meant. Please reply. Yours, Anne. Saturday, February 27th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, Pym is expecting the invasion any day now. Churchill has had pneumonia, but is gradually getting better. Gandhi, the champion of Indian freedom, is on one of his umpteenth hunger strikes. Miss Van D claims she's fatalistic, but who's the most afraid when the guns go off? None other than Petrilla Van Dam. Jan brought along the episcopal letter that the bishops addressed to their parishioners. It was beautiful and inspiring. People of the Netherlands, stand up and take action. Each of us must choose our own weapon to fight for the freedom of our country, our people, and our religion. Give your help and support. Act now. This is what they're preaching from the pulpit. Will it do any good? It's definitely too late to help our fellow Jews. Guess what happened to us now? The owner of the building sold it without informing Mr. Cougar and Mr. Kleinman. One morning the new landlord arrived with an architect to look the place over. Thank goodness Mr. Kleinman was in the office. He showed the gentleman all there was to see. With the exception of the secret annex, he claimed he'd left the key at home, and the new owner asked no further questions. If only he doesn't come back demanding to see the annex. In that case, we'll be in big trouble. Father emptied a card file for Margot and me and filled it with an index card that are blank on one side. This is to become our reading file, in which Margot and I are supposed to note down the books we've read, the author, and the date. I've learned 2 new words, brothel and coquette. I've bought a separate notebook for new words. There's a new division of butter and margarine. Each person is to get their portion on their own plate. The distribution is very unfair. The Van Dams, who always make breakfast for everyone, give themselves 1.5 times more than they do us. My parents are much too afraid of an argument to say anything, which is a shame, because I think people like that should always be given a taste of their own medicine. Yours, Anne. Thursday, March 4th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, Miss Van Dam has a new nickname. We've started calling her Miss Beaverbrook, of course. That doesn't mean anything to you, so let me explain. A certain Mr. Beaverbrook often talks on the English radio about what he considers to be the far too lenient bombardment of Germany. Miss Van Dam, who always contradicts everyone, including Churchill, and the news reports, is in complete agreement with Mr. Beaverbrook. So we thought it would be a good idea for her to be married to him, and since she was flattered by the notion, we've decided to call her Miss Beaverbrook from now on. We're getting a new warehouse employee since the old one is being sent to Germany. That's bad for him, but good for us, because the new one won't be familiar with the building. We're still afraid of the men who work in the warehouse. Gandhi is eating again. The black market is doing booming business. If we had enough money to pay the ridiculous prices, we could stuff ourselves silly. Our greengrocer buys potatoes from the Welsh Mart and brings them in sacks to the private office. Since he suspects we're hiding here, he makes a point of coming during lunchtime, when the warehouse employees are out. So much pepper is being ground at the moment that we sneeze and cough with every breath we take. Everyone who comes upstairs greets us with an achoo. Miss Van D swears she won't go downstairs. One more whiff of pepper and she's going to get sick. I don't think Father has a very nice business. Nothing but pectin and pepper. As long as you're in the food business, why not make candy? A veritable thunderstorm of words came crashing down on me again this morning. The air flashed with so many coarse expressions that my ears were ringing with Anne's bad this, and Van Dam's good that. Fire and brimstone. Yours, Anne. Wednesday, March 10th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, we had a short circuit last night, and besides that, the guns were booming away until dawn. I still haven't gotten over my fear of planes and shooting, and I crawl into Father's bed nearly every night for comfort. I know it sounds childish, but wait till it happens to you. The ack-ack guns make so much noise that you can't hear your own voice. Miss Beaverbrook, the fatalist, practically burst into tears and said in a timid little voice, "Oh, it's so awful. Oh, the guns are so loud," which is another way of saying, "I'm so scared." It didn't seem nearly as bad by candlelight as it did in the dark. I was shivering as if I had a fever and begged Father to relight the candle. He was adamant there was to be no light. Suddenly we heard a burst of machine gun fire, and then 10 times worse than anti-aircraft guns. Mother jumped out of bed and, to Pym's great annoyance, lit the candle. Her resolute answer to the grumbling was, "After all, Anne is not an ex-soldier," and that was the end of that. Have I told you any of Miss Van D's other fears? I don't think so. To keep you up to date on the latest adventures in the secret annex, I should tell you this as well. One night Miss Van D thought she heard loud footsteps in the attic, and she was so afraid of burglars she woke her husband. At that same moment the thieves disappeared, and the only sound Miss Van D could hear was the frightened pounding of his fatalistic wife's heart. "Oh, Putty," she cried. Putty is Miss Van D's pet name for her husband. "They must have taken all our sausages and dried beans. And what about Peter? Oh, do you think Peter's still safe and sound in his bed?" "I'm not sure they've stolen Peter. Stop being such a ninny, and let's get back to sleep." Impossible. Miss Van D was too scared to sleep. A few nights later, the entire Van Daan family was awakened by ghostly noises. Peter went to the attic with a flashlight and a scurry. What do you think he saw running away? A whole slew of enormous rats. Once we knew who the thieves were, we let Moochie sleep in the attic and never saw our uninvited guests again, at least not at night. A few evenings ago, it was 7:30 and still light. Peter went up to the loft to get some old newspapers. He had to hold on tight to the trap door to climb down the ladder. He put down his hand without looking and nearly fell off the ladder from shock and pain. Without realizing it, he'd put his hand on the large rat, which had bitten him in the arm. By the time he reached us, white as a sheet and with his knees knocking, the blood had soaked through his pajamas. No wonder he was so shaken. Petting a rat isn't much fun, especially when it takes a chunk out of your arm. Yours, Anne. Friday, March 12th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, may I introduce Mama Frank, the children's advocate. Extra butter for the youngsters, the problem facing today's youth, you name it. And Mother defends the younger generation. After a skirmish or two, she always gets her way. One of the jars of pickled tongue is spoiled, a feast for Moochie and Bosch. You haven't met Bosch yet, but despite the fact that she was here before we went into hiding, she's the warehouse and office cat who keeps the rats at bay in the storeroom. Her odd political name can easily be explained. For a house, the firm Geese & Co. had 2 cats, one for the warehouse and one for the attic. Their paths crossed from time to time, which invariably resulted in a fight. The warehouse cat was always the aggressor, while the attic cat was ultimately the victor. Just as in politics, so the warehouse cat was named the German or Bush, and the attic cat the Englishman or Tommy. Some time after that, they got rid of Tommy, but Booch is always there to amuse us when we go downstairs. We've eaten so many brown beans and navy beans that I can't stand to look at them. Just thinking about them makes me sick. Our evening serving of bread has been canceled. Daddy just said that he's not in a very cheerful mood. His eyes look so sad again, the poor man. I can't tear myself away from the book A Knock at the Door by Ina Baker Boudier. This family saga is extremely well written, but the parts dealing with war, writers, and the emancipation of women aren't very good. To be honest, these subjects don't interest me much. Terrible bombing raids on Germany. Mr. Van Daan is grouchy. The reason, the cigarette shortage. The debate about whether or not to start eating the canned food ended in our favor. I can't wear any of my shoes except my ski boots, which are not very practical around the house. A pair of straw thongs that were purchased for 650 guilders were worn down to the soles within a week. Maybe Meep will be able to scrounge up something on the black market. It's time to cut Father's hair. Pym swears that I do such a good job. He'll never go to another barber after the war. If only I didn't nick his ear so often. Yours, Anne. Thursday, March 18th, 1943. My dearest Kitty, turkeys entered the war. Great excitement. Anxiously awaiting radio reports. Friday, March 19th, 1943. Dearest Kitty, in less than an hour, joy was followed by disappointment. Turkey hasn't entered the war yet. It is only a cabinet minister talking about Turkey giving up its neutrality sometime soon. The newspaper vendor in Dam Square was shouting, "Turkey on England's side," and the papers were being snatched out of his hands. This was how we'd heard the encouraging rumor. 1,000 guilder notes are being declared invalid. That'll be a blow to the black marketers and others like them, but even more to people in hiding and anyone else with money that can't be accounted for. To turn in 1,000 guilder bill, you'd have to be able to state how you came by it and provide proof. They can still be used to pay taxes, but only until next week. If 500 notes will lapse at the same time, Geist and Company will still have some unaccounted for 1,000 guilder bills, which they use to pay their estimated taxes for the coming year, so everything seems to be above board. Dessel has received an old-fashioned foot-operated dentist drill. That means I'll probably be getting a thorough checkup soon. Dessel is terribly lax when it comes to obeying the rules of the house. Not only does he write letters to his Charlotte, he's also carrying out a chatty correspondence with various other people. Margot, the Annex Dutch teacher, has been correcting these letters for him. Father has forbidden him to keep up this practice, and Margot has stopped correcting the letters. But I think it won't be long before he starts up again. The Fuhrer has been talking to wounded soldiers. We listened on the radio, and it was pathetic. The questions and answers were something like this. My name is Heinrich Schuppel. Where were you wounded? Near Stalingrad. What kind of wound is it? 2 frostbitten feet and a fracture on the left arm. This is an exact report. The hideous puppet show aired on the radio. This wound seemed proud of their wounds. The more the better. One was so beside himself at the thought of shaking hands, I presume he still had one, with a Fuhrer that he could barely say a word. I happened to drop Dessel's soap on the floor and step on it. Now there's a whole piece missing. I've already asked Father to compensate him for the damages, especially since Dessel only gets 1 bar of inferior wartime soap a month. Yours, Anne.